Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the virtual bookmark. It's becoming a thing now. You know, I'm sort of kind of proud. I'm in my dining room, but it's an extension of the bookmark. We have Nicola Harrison with us tonight, and we were hoping that we could have her in person, but, you know, the pandemic gods were not on our side. So we decided to err on the side of safety, and she very graciously came in earlier today, so she signed a lot of books, so come and get your signed copy. Her new book is The Showgirl, which I have to tell you, I have read and absolutely adored. It's great historical fiction. I'm not going to tell you the story because I'm going to let her do that. And it's got great characters and an ending that will make you smile. And I can't tell you how many times in the last umpteen months people have said, I want something that's well written, not silly, that will not depress me because I'm already depressed. And so we found it. This is the book. So thank you for writing that. And this is her earlier book, Montauk. So once you find out how much you love her, you're going to want to go back and read this one as well, because you don't want to miss anything that she's written. And, you know, they can't write as fast as we can read. It's not fair to expect that. So welcome and thank you. Hopefully next time you'll get to come and spend some time with us in the bookstore. You came a long way from the other coast, so welcome to the East Coast and rainy Florida.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great to visit you in the store today. You have a beautiful store. So I'm thrilled to be here to talk about The Showgirl.
Well, tell us a little bit about what it's about. I don't want to try and summarize it in front of you. That would be embarrassing. I might mess up a little.
Sure. So The Showgirl takes place in the Roaring 20s, and it follows the story of Olive McCormick, who is a young woman from the Midwest, and she's determined to make it onto the stage as a Broadway Ziegfeld Follies showgirl. And she gives up everything in order to make this happen. She basically shows up in New York City and demands a role in the show from the Broadway producer, Florence Ziegfeld. And so we go on this fun, wild ride with her on her ups and downs and her triumphs and hardships, from New York City's theater district and the stage on Broadway down to the West Village in New York City, where we meet her bohemian friends and artists, up to the Adirondacks in upstate New York, where she goes to perform for some wealthy families. But of course, there's a love story involved, and she meets she meets a man called Archie Carmichael, who sweeps her off her feet. And he's the first man to really accept her for her modern ways and her independent nature and her passion for success. But not everything as it seems, that she has a secret in her past, and it sort of threatens to derail her chances for happiness. So in the end, she has to decide if she's willing to reveal the secret, and give up the life she loves for the man she loves.
Those are a lot of hard choices right there. That really does sum it up pretty nicely. Why did you pick this particular time period in the 1920s? There's so many parts of the 1920s. How did you get to that time and to this way into that time?
Yeah, so I love the 1920s. I've always been fascinated with this time period, but I actually had no idea when I decided to write my second novel that I was going to be writing about the 20s or about a showgirl. I had actually written an article for a travel magazine about a luxury resort, a hotel that you can stay at now, that's up in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. And it's like, you know, $2,000 a night to stay there. It's very fancy.
Oh.
And you go hiking and boating and everything during the day. And then at night, they throw these cocktail parties where you have to dress up, even though you're in the woods, in the mountains, you have to dress up in cocktail dresses, and the men have to wear tuxedos. And they try to bring back a taste of the past. And the reason is because originally this property was owned by William Avery Rockefeller II, and it was his family compound, and that's where they would go for the summers. And it was called a great camp. And then the more I researched it, I learned that there were these other great camps, several other great camps up in the Adirondacks that were built by these industrialists at the turn of the century for their family vacation homes, but more than a home. I mean, there's like 13 cottages on each site, and a bowling alley and a tennis court and a lake house. And I thought, wow, these great camps sound really interesting. I could set a novel there, but I'd never been to one, or even up to the Adirondacks. So I got in the car with my husband and my son and my 2 chihuahuas, and we went up and we stayed, not at that place, it's $2,000 a night. We stayed at another more modest one called White Pine Camp. And the next day we got a tour of it with a local historian. And he showed us around, and he was showing us the different cottages and talking all about the architectural style, and it was all good, interesting stuff. And then he just casually mentioned that the original owner of this place, his wife had been a Ziegfeld Follies showgirl, and he said that she was a real party girl, and she always used to invite her friends up, her theater friends up to the woods, and throw these huge elaborate parties. And apparently she insisted that nobody should walk more than 500 feet without having a drink in their hands. So she would set up bar carts along the hiking trails with bartenders making cocktails. And I thought, this woman sounds like fun. And so so it sent me off on this whole other trail to start researching the Ziegfeld Follies and who she might have been. And I started imagining and fictionalizing a story around her. So it was just funny how it went off in a totally different direction than what I'd expected.
So did you do a lot of research on the Ziegfeld Follies itself, in addition to the Adirondack?
Yes. So once I knew I was going down that path, then I started going on a deep dive into the Ziegfeld Follies. And, I learned all about their crazy, rigorous rehearsal schedules and their elaborate costumes. I mean, they used to wear these headdresses, these 25-pound feather headdresses, and they used to have to saunter across the stage and do this thing called the Ziegfeld walk, which was like they had to hold their arms out a certain way and bend their elbow at the exact right amount, and while wearing these elaborate, heavy costumes. But what I learned about, I had heard of the Ziegfeld Follies before, but I didn't know that much about them until I started doing some research. And what I learned was that from 1907 until 1930, they were the most spectacular Broadway revue. And no one had ever seen anything like these kinds of shows before. And it's funny because now when you go to see a Broadway show, you expect to be wowed. You kind of know the music's going to be amazing, the talent is going to be good, the stage setup is all going to be great. But then no one had ever seen anything like this before. It was just so elaborate and so over the top, and he expected his girls to be at the highest caliber, and so it was really interesting to see. And Florian Ziegfeld really sort of paved the way for the shows that we see today.
Did you try and put on a 25-pound and see how much that weighed and if you could walk at all?
I didn't actually, but I did go to when I was living in New York, and I did go to like an underground speakeasy party that was a 20s themed, and I dressed up in a sequin dress, and I did my hair and makeup with my friend. We both got all dolled up in our 20s attire, and I was like, anything in the name of research. So.
I appreciate your sacrifice. It made it much more realistic. So, but I want to see you with the 25-pound.
I know.
If you could keep your elbows straight and walk like a Ziegfeld girl, because that's very difficult to do. It must have been exhausting for them.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
So most of your characters in your books are really very strident, strong women, especially for their time. I mean, it's pretty compelling to have a 20-year-old leave Minneapolis in Minnesota and come to New York City and decide she's going to be a Ziegfeld girl.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty gutsy kind of move.
Especially
what attracts you to those people, and what does it tell the rest of us that we should consider?
Yeah, especially back then. I mean, then it was just so much harder and so much more unheard of. My character Olive in this book was really ahead of her time. So then in the 20s, women had just got the right to vote, so they were emboldened by that. They wanted their opinions heard. They wanted to dress the way they wanted to dress, and they wanted to dance the way they wanted to dance, and do the things they wanted to do. And so Olive is definitely one of those. And the flappers, these were the symbol of the time. And so Olive was definitely one of those girls. And I really enjoyed writing her character because she's fiercely independent and feisty, and she's sort of willing to do anything to get what she wants. And she wants to become a Ziegfeld girl. And this is a time when, a lot of women were not working outside the home. And while they were enjoying these new freedoms, the older generation was, they just thought this was like crazy and terrible that there were these young women were acting this way. And also, aside from her personality and her fierce, fight for independence, the fashions were just so incredibly different. And so the older generation was like horrified by what they were wearing. They went from more Victorian styles with the high neck and the dress all the way down to the ground, very structured with corsets. And then all of a sudden they're like throwing the corsets out the window, going braless, wearing these little shift dresses, not just showing their ankle, but showing their whole calf. And you know, really, like, it's such a drastic change. When you think of now, when little changes in fashion happen, it's like, okay, we're going from a skinny jean to a, you know, a boyfriend cut, which is like a quarter of different, you know, or like a mid-rise to a high-rise. There's such small, minor changes. But those changes back then in fashion were so drastic. You can imagine how fun it was for women to dress in a drastically different way, and how horrified the older generation was.
So do you have some background in fashion?
I do. I was a fashion journalist. I lived in New York for 17 years, and I worked at various different magazines. My final job doing it was I was a style writer for Forbes. And I think, you know, my background in fashion journalism probably helps me write these kinds of books, because I'm very observant about it. I sort of notice everything. So when I'm doing all my research, it really sinks in. I'm probably too observant. Like sometimes I'll be watching a TV show with my husband or a movie or something, and we'll just get to the good part. And he'll be like on the edge of his seat waiting for something to happen. And I'm like, look at that guy's lapels. I mean, they're like a whole half inch too wide, or his shoulders are like way too big. He's like, oh my gosh. So I really like paying attention to all the little details and incorporating those into the book.
Your timing is perfect. In an area in the county south of us, they just have had a major dress code debacle that started last year that made the national news. So all those minor things can become very important. How short is your skirt? And, you know, all those.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look at that.
I know. They were doctoring yearbook pictures, so it was.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah.
Well, you're in that part of the world now, so.
Yeah.
So it's nice to notice those things. You know, you talk about Olive, that she's very feisty and very independent, and she really is feisty and independent. But not all the Ziegfeld girls. I mean, they were independent in that they went on stage, and that gave them access to a different life, certainly. But a lot of them were looking for a husband.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think a lot of them, that is ultimately the goal, is to, you know, find a husband, settle down, have someone take care of them. And there, you know, I write about it in the book that there are these stage door Johnnies, as they're known, all these guys who would gather around the stage door and show up with like flowers and jewelry, just wanting to take out any of these Ziegfeld girls, because they really were the celebrities of the time. You know, there were no Kardashians or Taylor Swift. You know, these girls on stage who were in the Ziegfeld Follies, those were the celebrities. So these guys would gather around trying to take them out and ask them to, you know, go dancing with them and everything. And I think some of these Ziegfeld women definitely wanted to settle down and not have to work so hard and be on the stage. But not Olive.
What was the likelihood that they were going to settle down with a stage door Johnny?
Well, I think these Johnnies were like, you know, also businessmen and, you know, good guys too. So I think there's a good chance.
Well, some of them did. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And did that happen in real life? Was it a road to something else? Was there a lot of turnover, I guess is the question. Because you have to be a certain age probably to be a Follies girl.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have to be a certain age, you know, and they age out of it very fast, especially Florent Ziegfeld was so particular about the women that he chose. I mean, they had to have a certain look, a certain height. He even did this crazy thing where he would have a clear mask that he would like hold up to the women's faces when he was auditioning them to see if they were symmetrical enough for him on the stage. He was so particular about what he wanted. And of course, you know, if you got pregnant or anything, it was like, oh, out with her and in with someone new. And
yeah, so there was a lot of coming and going.
A lot of coming and going. And one of a great book that I read during my research was a memoir by a woman called Doris Eaton Travis. And she, at age 14, she was the youngest woman ever to be cast in the Ziegfeld Follies. And
wow.
Yeah, and she actually went on to live to be 106. And
that is a Ziegfeld girl, oh yeah.
But when she turned 100, she went back to the New Amsterdam Theater, which is where they performed, and she had her 100th birthday there, and she danced on stage with 24 other showgirls dancing the conga line behind her.
Good for her.
I saw the video of it. I looked up the video, and she looked great.
I think I'm going to have to look that up too.
Yeah.
You wonder what Florence Ziegfeld would think of that.
I know. Surely he'd be impressed.
I think so, but not in his show.
No, in another show.
She'd be way too old for his show.
Yeah.
So you've also got the crash of 1929 in there, which is I mean, you've got the glitz and glamour of the 20s, which come crashing down.
Yeah.
Affects everybody, certainly Ziegfeld and anybody of any wealth and any means, and then the trickle down is pretty intense. People can't go to a show, they can't do anything. The stage door Johnnies don't have any money to take you out, or things really fall apart. People lose everything. How do you compare that time with our time? It's always nice to think about what we've gotten from a different time period. It's somehow consoling to think that everything's not unique and new every day.
Right. That's true. Yeah. I mean, I've certainly read some articles and heard on the news economists comparing the 1920s to the 2020s. In the 1920s, World War I was right behind them. Thankfully, we haven't had a world war anytime soon. But they also had the flu epidemic of 1918 that had just happened. I think that killed like 50 million people worldwide. So when they were finally able to put that behind them, that's really what caused this like celebratory atmosphere of the 1920s. They were so excited and happy to be able to socialize again and see music and go dancing. And it was like a real, party atmosphere. And people are saying that, when we're able to put this COVID stuff behind us, that there'll be a similar sort of, energy and enthusiasm and a surge of spending as well. And that's the other thing that happened in the 1920s. There was a real surge of spending. Everyone was like, I've been cooped up at home, not really spending much or doing anything. And suddenly I'm going out and I want to spend. And they were, of course, in the 20s, they were buying all the new available appliances like toasters and stuff. Woo! I'm so excited.
I don't think that's going to be my first shopping trip, but it's a possibility. A brand new toaster, not top of my list, but
And there was
a certain hedonism.
Yes, and they were so excited to spend, and they were putting it all on credit, and so this big party came to a crashing halt. So hopefully we will have learned some lessons from the past, and we won't have a crashing halt at the end.
Well, we sort of went there through that 2007, 8, 9. We had our crash, our boom and bust. So hopefully we learned our lesson a little bit. But I do think there's that sense of pent-up hedonism that we just want to, enjoy the moment and not have to worry about so many things.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And of course,
how does this play with the prohibition?
Oh, and prohibition too. Yeah, I mean, and that just adds to the party feel, because it's like, if anytime someone tells you not to do something, of course, everyone's like, well, let's do it. So don't drink. And then they all find ways to do it, and the speakeasies and the bathtub gin and all of that kind of stuff. But it's funny, of course, when I was writing this book, I actually had no idea that there would be a comparison between the 1920s and the 2020s, because I had finished this book and turned it in to the publisher before, this had happened.
Yeah, there is that important understanding of the lag time. It takes a long time to write, and then a long time for it to see the light of day from when you finish. So yes, life changed a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I was finishing up edits and things when COVID happened.
But it's nice, that shows the power of a good story, that it has lasting power. And since reading is such a two-way street, you see different things when you read books at different times. So
right. Yeah, they mean different things to you depending on what's going on in your life. That's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because as we're talking, I just keep picturing Zelda Fitzgerald. That's just the image of the flapper girl that comes
that's
to mind. Is that,
You're exactly right. That's the whole feeling. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you should dress up for your event. That would be, you probably look like you've got your costume still.
I do.
So I invite people to ask some questions. I've been hogging the stage here, and it's fun to do, and I'll do it all night. But if you have something that you want to ask, please feel free to type it into either the questions or the say something part, and we will share them and have Nicola answer them for you. In the meantime, tell us about the cover too, because that is just exquisite and so perfect.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's a fun story. The cover is always interesting because, the publisher decides on the cover, But you, as an author, you're like, oh my gosh, I've been working on this baby for like, it took me 2 years to write this one. And, you know, all of your passion and energy has gone into it. You really want to make sure that you love the cover. And so, so this is published by St. Martin's Press, and they showed me a cover and they said, this is what we're thinking, you know, do you like it? And I liked it, but I didn't love it. And so I said, can I see the other ones that you were looking at? Because I know they'd had a meeting in the art department and they probably had a few that they were talking about. So they showed me a few others that they had designed, and the others were very similar to the one that they showed me. And then this one was completely different, and it just stuck out so much. And I was like, that one, that's the one I want. Can we please do that? And so they graciously accepted. And I'm so happy they did, because I just am so proud of it. I love it. But it's funny because with historical fiction, you often have, as we do in Montauk, for my previous book, a woman who's got her back to the reader, looking away. And it's nice because when you see it, you know exactly that this is the book it is. It's historical fiction, yeah. And I love that cover too. It's got the lighthouse in the background. But I just really enjoyed like seeing this one look very different, and we actually get to see her face. That's a good spine too.
We just lost your face. I don't know if we'll get you back here, but hopefully we can get your face back, because you know, we would like to see you while we talk to you. But while we're waiting for that, I'm actually pleased that the publisher listens to you, because I don't know that people understand, you know, that you don't always have that much power over cover.
Right.
No. To make them, so they listen to you, which is great.
And I don't know if that's always the case with other publishing houses, but they were really wonderful. And actually, funny story about my first book, Montauk. We had a different cover for that, and the publisher showed it to me, and they said, "Do you like it?" And I loved it. It was the beach background that's there, but instead of the woman walking away, it had a line of laundry that you could kind of see through, because it has a tie-in with the story. And it was very beautiful. It was quite subtle, but it was very beautiful. And I said, yeah, sure, I love it. Great. So we went with it, and they started sending the books out to the different booksellers and bookstores. And one big bookseller, one big book chain, the buyer didn't like that cover. She said it didn't look historical enough. And so the publisher changed it for her.
Oh my!
No, I couldn't believe that one bookstore chain would have that much power, but I guess they do. And so then we went through the whole process where they showed me another one, and I was like, that's not quite right. And this looks too 50s, not 30s, because the Montauk is set in the 30s. And then we eventually settled on the woman in the blue dress. So yeah, they've been great about listening to my input.
Well, that's nice. You must do it well, because they don't always listen to the author's input. So you've done the 30s and the 20s. Mm-hmm. So are we moving through the decades? You haven't done them in chronological order, so you can just pick randomly which decade you're going to do next.
What decade do you think I'm going to write about next?
Well, I would think maybe the 40s. There's a good war going on then, so that's a good time period.
Yes. So this next one, I realized in the last year that my husband's grandmother was a Rosie the Riveter, and she worked in an airplane factory. And I had no idea. She worked in an airplane factory in Southern California during the war. And so when I found this out, of course, I had to get more scoop. So I spoke to my mother-in-law, and then I started researching about these Rosies. And what I thought was interesting was that, you know, they stepped up and took these jobs that were generally for men, because the men had gone off to war. And women, you know, most of these women had been housewives or hadn't worked outside of the home. And then they were building airplanes and bombs and tanks and all kinds of things that was considered a man's job. But then when the men came back from war, of course, they took their jobs back, and they were like, okay, ladies, thanks very much for your help. Go back to being a housewife. And some women that I read about were really disappointed, because they really enjoyed the work, and they really enjoyed that feeling of, the satisfying feeling of working and doing things that they didn't know they could do. So I kind of use that as a jumping off point. And so this new book takes place right after the war. And it's the story of Hazel Francis. And she's been working in an airplane factory. She doesn't have a job anymore, and she has to figure out what she's going to do with her life. So she ends up going down to Laguna Beach in California and taking a job as working for a very eccentric and famous artist who's got a very shady past. And so she gets deeply involved in the art world down there, because Laguna Beach was then an artist community and still is an artist community. So yeah, this one's 40s art, and it's fun.
I see you're already picking out your outfit.
I'm gonna work on my victory rolls. Apparently, that's how they wore their hair, with their victory rolls.
Well, I'm gonna have to start now. If I start now, I can get enough hair to pull that off. We do have a few questions. I've always wondered why authors pick the names they do for their characters. Why did you select the ones you did? And certainly you changed Olive McCormick to Olive Shine, which was a perfect stage name. So
yeah.
How did you get the name Olive McCormick?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because when I went up to the Adirondacks and I first learned about her, well, I first learned about the glimmer of her, and then I went on to fictionalize the character. But the original owner's wife's name was Olive. So in my notes, I was writing Olive, and then I was learning all these other things. And so she just became Olive to me. And at some point I planned to change her name, but then I thought she was already Olive to me. And so then the man she gets involved with, the owner of this camp, his name was Archie. So then I thought, you know what, I'm sticking with Archie and Olive, but I changed their last names, and we went off in a new direction. But I just got attached.
But actually, now that you say that, I mean, I remember our Olive and Archie. I mean, it just seems like who they are. I can't imagine they'd have other different names. So, you chose well. Somebody else wants to know, what was the required height and weight to be a Ziegfeld Follies showgirl? Other than the symmetrical.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact height and weight. I mean, he liked women to have curves. I don't remember exactly, but he was so particular. He used to say that he could just look at someone's neck and know exactly how their ankle and the rest of their leg would look. He was like a real pro at picking out these women, and he did all the auditions himself for as long as he could, and then he couldn't keep doing all those individual auditions, so he had other people take over for him.
So was there a specific age, or did it just matter how you looked? I mean, you could stick around if you still looked like you were 20, but not if you looked like you were 25. I
think it just was really based on looks. And as long as you looked young and youthful, you could keep going. Probably, early 20s. Well, I know that 30 was the dreaded number. Everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, if you're approaching 30, you're out, you're done." So
yeah, they must have lived in fear of getting fired, because there were no protections for them. Certainly, they weren't unionized.
Right, exactly.
So, what else do you want us to know about the writing process, or your book, or what to look forward to next?
Yeah, well, the writing process is fun, and I always start with research, and I research for a month or two, and I just devour as many books as I can, and watch old movies, and I'm spend a ridiculous amount of time at the library, and then I get to a point where I'm just like itching to go, and I haven't written a word yet for like 1 or 2 months. And then as the story's forming in my mind, I'm usually like itching to go. So that's when I know it's time to put those research books away and just start writing the story. And people are usually, when they're writers, they're usually either called a planner or a pantser. Planner is someone who maps it all out chapter by chapter, scene by scene. And a pantser is someone who flies by the seat of their pants. And I actually don't fit into either of those. I'm like right down the middle.
An independent woman. I'm not surprised.
Just like Olive. I tend to know where it's going to start. I generally know where it's going to go in the middle, and I usually have a pretty good idea where it's going to end. But then as I'm writing it, things come in and out. I end up going places that I didn't think we were going to go, or a character will walk in who I think is just going to have like a walk-on role, and then they'll end up staying. So it's funny, like I've heard people say that before I was an author, and I thought, how can like characters take on a life of their own? That doesn't sound realistic, but it really is. It really happens.
So do you miss them when you're done?
I do, and I just think to myself, you know what? Hopefully this will get made into a movie, and then I can keep enjoying it.
This would be a great movie, by the way.
Wouldn't it be fun?
It would. I have to tell you, as a reader, I get very attached to the characters in the book, and I miss them. You know, I look forward to going up every night and reading and seeing what they're up to, what they're thinking. Or when I'm done a book, I'm kind of sad.
Yeah, I know.
And I liked Olive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she's a flawed character. She certainly. There are certainly times when she does. When you're thinking, "Oh, you know, I wouldn't do that if I were you," or "Don't say that." But I think that's what I liked about her. And also, she was, you know, leading the way, and she's like a pioneer for women of her time. So I think that anytime you've got someone who's leading the charge like that, they're going to make mistakes along the way, and she certainly does.
I think it's very boring to have unflawed characters. You know?
Yeah,
we're all flawed. And totally good and totally bad is boring too. Right. So, you know, you have to be, you know, have a touch of the good and the bad in you and not be all one way or another. We have another person who's listening. She says, Eve Arden and Lucille Ball were Ziegfeld girls who made the transition to films. Were there any others who became starlets or names we might know?
Oh, yeah. Now I can't think of the names of them. I will, as soon as I get off, of course I'll remember names. Now I don't remember.
Okay, you can send it to me.
But I do remember, I did watch the movie with I think it was made in the 1940s, the movie with Lucille Ball in it, and I think it was called Ziegfeld or Ziegfeld Girl or something like that. And that was a really great movie to watch, to get an idea of you know, how they performed on the stage, and to see some of the elaborate stage design, like these huge staircases he would build. And they would have pianists on like huge baby grand pianos or something going down the stairs, like maybe 5 or 6 of them on the stage, and they would have 80 women on stage at a time. It was just crazy, that the things that he would do, and so you got to see that sort of come to life in the movie. So that was a fun one to watch.
I could see Lucille Ball as a Ziegfeld Follies girl.
Yes.
And Eve Arden, they seem perfect fits. I mean, I could see why he would pick them, but it would be a hard transition. You know, it's kind of like when they went to the talkies and people would be perfect, and then all of a sudden they'd open their mouth and that voice would come out and be like, "Oh God, no, not that."
Yeah.
You know, so.
It's so true, yeah. And then they were like, "Oh no, it's not going to work for you anymore. You got to get someone who's got a better voice."
And in some ways, you know, being part of Ziegfeld Follies, even when you're the star, you're part of a group. There's 80 women out there, and so to say that person is now going to go on to become a film star, that's a huge leap.
Very different, yes. Yeah, there was a real sense of camaraderie with the Ziegfeld girls too. They're also cheering each other on, and in this book, they there's a real friendship between the girls that we follow, which is fun.
Yeah, I like that too, because you think about this as being a very competitive field and a competitive time, and yet there were women that were bonding together, kind of Rosie the Riveter.
Yes.
Kind of notion that we're all in this together, and instead of, you know, hurting each other, we're going to help each other through the good times and the bad. So yeah. I think that's a wonderful. It's a book that's just going to make you smile, you know, even when you go through the difficult parts, because you're going to have hope, and it's a page turner in that regard. You want to know what's going to happen to everybody, because you do get attached to Olive, and you get attached to her friends and to Archie, and you know, you worry when the crash comes, and there always has to be a secret, and there's a big one. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, we did good. We didn't give away any spoilers today.
Oh, I'm not going to tell the secret. You know, no spoilers.
Yeah.
So if anybody has anything else, you know, now's the time, or, you know, as they say, forever hold your peace. This is your moment with Nicola Harrison. Is there anything else you want us to know before we let you go and enjoy your evening and hopefully have some dinner and a glass of wine?
I can't think of anything right now, but of course I'll think of it all afterwards. I don't know.
Well, then that means you just have to come back. So yeah. We'll use that as the segue to say, I'm going to hold, this is being recorded, so I'm going to hold you to that. I would invite you back to the BookMark in better times, when we could all sit around together and have a glass of wine. Yeah, and you can tell us about Rosie the Riveter. So please do come back and visit us in person. I would really appreciate it. And thank you so much for everything you're doing for us.
I'd love to. Thanks so much. And if anyone would like to follow along on the publishing journey, I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Nicola Harrison Author. So you can see where I'm going to be next.
Yes, and each book that Nicola signed for us has a little card in it that gives you. Can you see my little card? that gives you the information on the back of how to find her in different ways and to get in touch and keep in touch. So
yeah, I love to hear from readers when they've read the book too. That's always so fun to connect.
As do I. So thank you so much. Safe travels. Enjoy the rest of your trip, and I hope that everybody gets a chance to read this wonderful book, because it's the perfect time to read it. So thank you for that great gift, and come back and see us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.